This is another in the series of videos for the Chinese Religious Traditions Unit, and as always, you can watch these in any order you want, just make sure that you watch them all. This particular video is concerned with the idea of a Chinese worldview. Boy, is that a complicated idea. I've read an awful lot of Chinese religious tradition pieces, and I very rarely can find anybody that can string together all of this into some kind of a meaningful whole, a narrative that runs through it all. I think when you have 1 billion people and thousands of years to work with, you're going to end up with a whole variety of different ways of putting it together, and no two people are going to understand. We're probably not as interested in like a historical picture of the way people thought as we are in how one of those people in Beijing or Shanghai or someplace like that might think on the streets. How does the average Chinese person put it together? And honestly, I don't know. We're going to just put the pieces out and you can talk to folks. Let's start with the idea of heaven. There's a realm above and a realm below and humanity in between, and that's the basic picture. Heaven was probably 3,500 years ago. Heaven was Shangdi. He was a god that was worshipped in the Shang dynasty. But Shangdi, by the time we get down to the Zhao dynasty, is just like too big to wrap your mind around. It's sort of like Brahman, I guess, if you want to talk about the essence of all reality. And so it begins to be referred to as simply heaven. But that's not all of what heaven means. Very few Chinese people, I'm going to bet, would actually be able to tell you much about Shangdi, period. What they can tell you is that there's a realm up above, which is sort of bureaucracy. That bureaucracy would be headed up by the Jade Emperor, and I suppose a lot of Chinese people would still be familiar with the Jade Emperor, Mao Zedong be danged. And the Jade Emperor oversees a court, and the court's got all its dignitaries, and wait a minute, we'll come back to that in a little while. And then way down below, on this bottom level, on a physical level, is the earth. The earth isn't people. People are the interplay of the earth with heaven. And now we start to get to the idea of a yin and a yang sort of thing. Reality is one in Chinese tradition. Everything is ultimately one reality, but one reality very quickly can be understood as two polar opposites that work together. There's a creative tension within it. Whether you want to think in terms of masculine and feminine, that would be the yang and the yin, or you want to think in terms of hot and cold, or you want to think in terms of dark and light, or you want to think in terms of good and evil. Everything's got its polar opposite, and it's the interplay between the two, between the yin and the yang, that makes the creative process go. And so the earth would be the yin, the feminine principle, and the heaven would be the yang, the masculine principle. And when those two interplay, we come up with humanity. So that interplay of yin and yang, though, it's going to play its way all the way through everything that China does and thinks over the course of the next 3,000 years. All right, so let's talk about who we are as individuals. I don't know if this is what an average Chinese person would say today, but traditionally, the idea of a human soul went beyond what we think of in Western thought. I'm a body and I have a soul. In Chinese tradition, there was two parts to the soul. 2 souls, maybe? Sometimes as many as 10 souls or whatever. But the idea would be there was a Hun soul and a Po soul. Hun is the soul that's light, and when you die, goes to heaven, the spiritual side of who we are. And Po is the physical, tangible part of your soul that dies with you, stays in the grave with you. Boy, don't you wish it would be so easy as to say that. But here's as you read Chinese thinkers over the course of centuries, what you kind of get is the idea that Po soul is what you get. It's what your brain does. It's the part of you that animates you. It's your life force, your vigor, if you want to do it that way. And the Hun soul is what you develop through good ethics. It's what you develop by following a Confucian way, for instance. That's one answer to how you do it. And you fashion this thing that then goes on beyond. But then there are some Chinese thinkers who argue that you want to hang on to that Hun soul. You want to keep it around. That's grandpa. So they had all kinds of weird things like jade burial suits, thinking that if they put the body inside this jade burial suit, the Hun soul, that light ethereal soul, wouldn't be able to escape as quickly, and you keep them around longer. And I do wonder as I read, and although I've not seen the connection, whether there's something to the spirit tablets, you just keep venerating Dad, and Dad won't leave so quickly. That Hun soul will stick around longer. Maybe that was the idea. And then eventually when people stop paying attention, he just gets bored and goes off to heaven. I don't know if that's the way it works. Hun and Po are the two natures of soul. Don't get hung up on that, because the average Chinese person on the street probably isn't going to talk like that. But it's something written into the Chinese psyche somewhere down underneath there. Okay, and so let's see. Now, the universe is crafted like an infrastructure. We'll call that the Tao. Of course, Taoism wants to claim the Tao and say we're the ones that know all about it, but every religious perspective throughout China's history is going to have to speak about Tao. Because Tao is, I like to talk about it like the electric grid, the power grid of the city. It's a physical, tangible thing, so that the wires go out from the plant and they come back to the plant, and they spread out in a network, and it's just what it is. But you know what? A power grid with no power going through it is just a structure. And so you need something that flows through that structure. Now just keep in mind that structure comes to my house, comes into the house at the electric box, goes through the house and all those wires, pops down in electric fixtures like this, light fixtures, or outlets on the wall, and then somebody flips the switch on. Now I can use that energy, and that energy is not the Tao, the energy is the Qi. So now you're going to see the Tao and Qi go together. So Tao is the structure and Qi is the energy that flows through that structure. And if you've got a light bulb screwed into the socket and you turn the power on, the Qi is what makes the light go. But that Qi needs to flow well, which is why we have those curly-Q light bulbs nowadays, because we weren't flowing our energy very well. We were wasting a whole lot of energy, and that's the nature of what life is all about, to try to make the energy flow well. Now, on an individual level, that means that I'm going to have to watch what I eat. I need to eat the right kinds of foods for my particular physiological makeup. I love coffee. Coffee does well for me. I enjoy a couple of cups of coffee in the morning. I talk about it in class endlessly. I don't have any problems. I got a really good friend who absolutely loves coffee, but coffee gives her a stomach ache. Every cup of coffee gives her a stomach ache. So, you know what? Her physiology and my physiology are not the same. And Chinese tradition recognizes that. They say there are 5 different kinds of physiologies. This is a part of Chinese tradition too. When you've gone from the 1 to the 2, and down to the multiple, to recognize distinctions among us. And so the person who's got that particular physiology, maybe spicy foods aren't so good for that person, but for this person over here, maybe spicy foods are perfect for that person. And so my father-in-law, who's from Mexico, hates chili. But, I'm over here and I'm the gringo in the family. And by the way, I am married to a Mexican. I'm the gringo in the family, and man, I love chilies. And he says chili ruins food because it doesn't do his system well. Well, there goes the stereotype. Just because you happen to be born in Mexico doesn't mean you love habaneros. And just because you happen to be a gringo doesn't mean you have to have oatmeal at every meal. So my physiology, his physiology, they're different. Got the idea? So we work with whatever's going to make the energy flow through my physiology, or for him, what's going to make the energy flow through his physiology. And of course, the universe is built on this power grid, and so you want to seek out how that power runs through the grid. And that means paying attention to the cosmos itself, the energy flow of the cosmos. And this is why people do Feng Shui. They know that the energy is going to flow across the mountains and down the rivers and across the plains in different ways in different spots. And if you live on the dark side of a mountain versus on the bright side of the mountain, you're going to have a different energy flow. If you live on one side of the mountain, it can be a desert. You live on the other side of the mountain, you can be drenched constantly. And so you need to pay attention to the way the energy flows in the cosmos and build your space accordingly. Because if you build a house so that the energy flows through your house, and you live in that house, the energy flows through you. There's your idea. And of course, the stars themselves are all part of the cosmos. It's not just a mess out there, but even if it was at random, even if, you got the Big Bang Theory, the way they are makes energy flow a certain way in certain parts of the cosmos. And paying attention to what's up in the sky can give you a sense of how the energy is flowing through everything. You getting the idea of a Chinese worldview? People die, they do not, there's no talk in Chinese tradition of a reincarnation process. Taoism isn't interested in that, never addresses whether it does or it doesn't happen, but it doesn't seem like it does. It seems like a check-in, check-out thing, you move on up. And then in that realm that's human, we're here, and my ancestors are here, and then heaven is up here. So they're kind of go-betweens. I can work with them. They're emissaries to heaven. And so if I keep that relationship with my ancestors alive through the use of spirit tablets, and it's the responsibility of the son. This is why it's so important to have a son. Because the daughter marries, and this is traditional, and she goes and she lives with the other family. She belongs to them now. And so now if I die and my daughter's married off to another family, who's going to take care of me? I need a son who will be here, who will take care of, make a spirit tablet, and offer me things like spirit money to spend on the other side. Spirit money, you get 50 billion yen bill for 10 cents. So it's not like it's expensive on this side. And on that side, you go, woohoo, I can have a field day with it. So make sure you give me some of that, usually by burning it. Make sure you come and visit my grave. Have a good time with me. Feed me. And if you take care of me on this side, on the other side, I'm there for you, and I can be an in-betweener for you. As long as I got a son or a grandson or a great-grandson who'll do this for me, I'll be able to stick around, but you stop it and I'm gone. So there's a set period of time that the spirit tablet is on the table, and then the spirit tablet becomes a picture in a frame with a bunch of relatives behind it, and then after a while, it's just gone. It's no longer a part of life. But that's about it for a Chinese worldview.